Hey guys, what's going on? Blaine back for another Netflix review, and today I'm going to be talking about Narvik. Narvik is a Norwegian war film that depicts the Battle of Narvik in World War II, and tells the story of Gunnar and Ingrid, a married couple living in the village of Narvik, which is notable for its large store of iron resources. The Nazis seek to obtain the iron for their own purposes, which results in them violating Norway's neutrality clause and going to war with Norway. Because of this, Gunnar is forced to mobilize and join his fellow soldiers in fighting back against the enemy, while Ingrid has to take care of things back home with their son Ole, as well as other events in the village. The two fight their own respective battles as they work to preserve both their home and family. I always love getting to watch war stories that are depicted in other countries outside of the main allied powers, and this one proved to be a solid watch in that regard. While it can get complicated at times with its story, it still tells a gripping narrative on a surprisingly large scale that not many may know about, from both a military and civilian perspective. The main character Gunnar provides a more traditional view into the conflict of Narvik, as the movie follows his attempts to defend his home on the front lines. He goes through the same struggles as many other soldiers like him did, which provides some degree of familiarity to help the audience become attached to him as a protagonist. He is a bit on the generic side as far as characterization goes, but his family background helps flesh him out better, specifically when his relationship to his son is shown. It provides a more intimate view on what kind of stakes are at play in his battle, and he remains consistently determined to achieve his goal, which makes him a likable character. But to be honest, Ingrid was actually the character that made the movie work for me. She displays a lot of initiative and wears a lot of hats, from looking after her son, performing her job at the local hotel, and providing cover for English nationals who are being hunted by the Nazis. It's through her that the audience gets to see what else happens in the war beyond just soldiers shooting each other. The weight of everything going on in Narvik weighs on her more over time, as she becomes increasingly more forced to make tough choices that affect how she's perceived by others, which makes her a sympathetic character to root for. In turn, this makes the relationship between her and Gunnar more interesting. Gunnar and Ingrid's beliefs come into conflict with each other as the pressures of war start to mount, which reflect the growth they both experience as characters. Gunnar finds himself more dedicated to staying in and protecting his country, while Ingrid looks for ways to make life easier in it and potentially find a way out of it. Both of these differing views become more nuanced over time and are completely understandable in their own way, which goes to show how much the line of morality can get blurred in the fog of war. The only thing I didn't like regarding the main characters is the way the movie balances between them. At a certain point in the first act, there's a shift in focus between Gunnar and Ingrid, with one of them basically disappearing and the other taking up a lot more screen time in comparison. And it does make sense as to why the focus changes, as something serious does happen to one of them, and the movie does recover from the stumble of its pacing in this regard later on, but even so, I still felt the change was kind of abrupt. As I mentioned before, this movie does something not often seen for the war genre, and that it gives an almost equal level of focus between the military and civilians of Narvik, and how both parties scramble to protect their home from Nazi forces, and it is fascinating to see how this duality plays out. There's a real small town aspect emphasized by Gunnar and Ingrid's family. Whether they talk to neighbors on the streets of Narvik or interact with staff at work, there's a more intimate level of detail given into portraying the world that these characters live in, which makes it easier to be drawn into the story as it proceeds. Beyond the town of Narvik itself, I also liked how it showed the manhunt for British nationals, which, as funny as it may seem, was actually something I never thought that much about. It adds another element of tension to the story, and it just provides a unique perspective on an already unique conflict. However, things do start to get a bit out of hand as the story goes on, which leads to its biggest problem, and that I personally felt that it had too much going on in terms of plot. Now, it makes sense for multiple variables being at play in the middle of something as complex as war, but I felt that these variables didn't always help for the pacing of the story. For example, the subplot where Ingrid helps hide the British nationals was good by itself and provides some interesting commentary on international affairs, but then later on, the movie brings out this espionage plot thread that left me scratching my head. It just seemed to come out of nowhere, caused a weird tonal shift in the scene it's introduced, and wasn't even focused on all that much afterward. Another example is the bond that's established between Ingrid and the Nazi officer who she corresponds with. Now, I actually find it intriguing that the movie portrayed him as a bit more diplomatic on account of the neutrality clause, while still being a threat of sorts, but the chemistry between the characters is lukewarm, and once again their subplot never really goes anywhere. While the story can and does get sidetracked multiple times, the movie is still successful in terms of how it portrays the scale of the Battle of Narvik, and a big part of that is the action sequences. The set pieces are surprisingly detailed and the action is intense, especially in the scenes where Gunnar and his men are forced to engage in trench warfare and fight in close quarters. The film's aesthetics really help to ramp up the intensity too. The soundtrack is riveting, the production design is top notch, and the cinematography is absolutely breathtaking. I know I've said this about other Norwegian movies in the past, but I don't think I've ever seen a movie from Norway that has bad cinematography, at least not yet. Even though the Battle of Narvik wasn't necessarily a massive battle compared to others, the way shots are filmed help make it feel bigger. Between the wide shots of mountain ranges and the clever lighting used with snow and fog during nighttime scenes to convey a sinister mood, the movie has this grand feel to it that makes it more appealing to watch. The movie does start to become more predictable as events proceed, but the attention to detail with depicting Narvik and the importance of the conflict surrounding iron ore proved to be an educational experience, and it's backed up by an excellent and emotional finale that reinforces the perspectives of all characters involved. Overall, Narvik is an enjoyable war film that tells a riveting story about a battle not often talked about. If you like war movies and you want to see one outside of a more traditional Allies versus Axis format, you'd enjoy checking this out. While it is fairly basic as a war movie and its plot structure can get complicated, the dynamic of the lead characters, the depiction of its setting, and gripping action scenes make it worth watching. I'm glad to see war stories like these continue to be made in honor of the soldiers who died defending their home from tyranny, as it goes to show just how far-reaching the impact of war really is. What did you think about this movie? Did you enjoy seeing the attention to detail behind its depiction of Narvik, or were you also bothered by its multiple subplots? Let me know in the comments below. Anyways guys, that's going to wrap up my review of Narvik. Thanks for watching this video, I hope you enjoyed it, and as always stay tuned for the next part, where next time I review the American romantic comedy, You People. Bye bye!